Today on Locked On Red Wings, should Detroit sign Max Pacioretty?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's also the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I didn't think we'd be doing this kind of episode in September, Scotty. Should the Detroit Red Wings sign X player? One, because most of the free agents are gone, right? Most notable free agents are gone. Two, because this Red Wings roster is already full and also very weirdly built. So I did not expect to be doing this, but there were reports out of David Pagnotta that Max Pacioretty is, or I guess I should say it's the other way around. There are two teams that are finalists for Max Pacioretty in his reports, that it's the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings. If you read other reports, other names are out there, like the Anaheim Ducks are in the mix as well. But really kind of caught me off guard that the Red Wings are in the mix for Patches, as he is so affectionately known, because of the fact that this roster already has 12 forwards and has youth pushing to push some of those other forwards out already for the Red Wings to go after a guy of Max Pacioretty's caliber. But let's not get it twisted, right? In his prime, he had a career high of 39 goals and multiple 30-plus goal seasons, and a few seasons, 30 seasons where he was getting 60-plus points, and
like
he had a 20
consistently for like almost a decade.
Was at one point the captain of the Montreal Canadiens. This was a really, really good hockey player. It's just it's weird timing with where the Red Wings are at, where their roster is at, and who they still have left to sign, that they're the finalists for this type of player. And I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, too, in this conversation, because the first thing I want to ask before I really lay it all out for you guys is, like, Scotty, when you heard that Max Pacioretty, or the Red Wings are a finalist to get Max Pacioretty, at least according to Dave Pagnotta, what was your initial reaction, and, like, do you even see a fit for him on this roster?
It's an interesting place to start, right? Like, is this even a smart thing to do? Like, you know what I mean? Is this even something that is that should be on the table for the Wings? I think I'm kind of at a point where if it was announced tomorrow that the Wings signed him, I would view it as a positive, and I think that you could do the kind of mental gymnastics to find a place for him on the roster relatively easily. Although, like you said, it's definitely not an easy. It's not a gimme either, right? It's not, oh, look, there's clearly a spot for him right there. You would have to probably part ways with somebody that maybe this whole summer we didn't expect we'd have to. But I do think that if the Wings were confident enough, and if the front office was confident enough in him playing in a lesser role throughout the entire season, that I would probably give them the benefit of the doubt and be okay with it. But like, as you said, this also isn't he hasn't had a 2020 season since the 2020-2021 season. So that's going to be 4 seasons removed once this one starts. Had 19 and 18 in 2021-2022, barely played in 22-23. And then last year, right, yeah, exactly.
That's when he had 2 blown Achilles tendons in the same season.
Correct, yeah, and that entire storyline was a wild one. And then obviously, this past season, in just under 50 games, scores just 4 goals and has just 19 assists, which is, because of the amount of apples there, you're still talking about a half a point a game player. A guy that back in his heyday was not only a leader, as you mentioned, but also a solid defensive forward. like there's certainly reasons that, if they brought him in, it would be, like that's kind of a cool ad for a bottom six, type of role. It's just, I don't think it's a necessity either. Like if this is just a story that rolls off the back and we never hear about it again, we never hear any rumors about it again, I don't think anybody's going to be, sitting around in November or December going, dang, like I really wish we had signed Patches.
Right. I mean, I think that's where I'm at with it now, because he had those 2 blown Achilles tendon that nearly ended his career. It is remarkable that he came back from that and played.
Remarkable it didn't at his age.
Yeah. He's 35 years old, coming off of a year, 47 games played, half point per game with the Washington Capitals. And that's, decent production for a guy his age, coming off of injuries that severe consecutively. But I don't think there's a spot on this roster for current Max Pacioretty. I mean, yes, you're gambling that another year of offseason, because you could make the same argument for Pacioretty that people made for Patrick Kane. Obviously, Patrick Kane is cut from a different type of cloth when it comes to skill level, right? But Max Pacioretty, we talked about, has throughout his career was a consistent like 30-30 guy for a pretty significant chunk, and at one point touched 39 goals, was one off of a 40-goal season when he was with the Montreal Canadiens. But And so you could gamble on the fact that maybe with a full offseason of training, like an NHL player again, he could return to that form. Because you mentioned how he hasn't had a 2020 season since 2021. Too many 20s.
Yeah, that was a mouthful for me too, yeah.
The season after that, he only played 39 games, and he had 37 points. So, he was on and off the IR in that season as well, but he was still a point-per-game player that year with a very good Vegas Golden Knights team. His production,
and that 2020-2021 season was he only played in 48 games and was 51 points. He was over a point-a-game player in that year as well. So, not for nothing. It's just we're about to be 4 seasons removed from that caliber of production. That's all. That's a long time.
Right. I'm just saying you could make the argument that you could have the same kind of Patrick Kane-esque gamble on Max Pacioretty after a full offseason. But my point is one, that's a gamble, right? It paid off with Patrick Kane, at least thus far. It's not a guarantee to pay off again. And also, I don't think we need Max Pacioretty. I don't think we need to take that gamble on Max Pacioretty, I guess is the better way of phrasing that, because if you look at this roster, it is full. Like, what do we need another power play specialist on this team to do? A guy is particularly who doesn't, with the Washington Capitals last year, he was a very sheltered forward in his usage. Yeah. Got played against easier competition than other players on his team. Part of that is just because how the roster was constructed. He was a bottom 6 forward on that team, but he definitely played against easier competition, had over 50% of offensive zone deployments versus defensive zone deployments. We don't need another player like that, especially on a team that's trying to get better defensively. He had 0 penalty kill time with the Washington Capitals. He had, I think he was 6th or 7th amongst forwards in power play time. Like, we already have guys that fill that role. And, yes, there is, getting Pacioretty, you get a huge locker room leader in him as well. There is the possibility, again, that his offense could come back, though I'm not betting on it after 2 consecutive blown Achilles tendons. I just don't see where getting Max Pacioretty isn't going to just end up blocking a younger player from making his NHL debut that may be ready. And, of course, that is a conversation that can be had at the organizational level, because we're not in the locker room. We don't actually make the decision on who's NHL ready and who's not, clearly, and for good reason. But at the same time, I just don't see a world where right now with this roster that's already needs to find a way to cut a player or two, more than likely, or at least send them to Grand Rapids through waivers, where we need another offense-only forward. I don't see that as a need, especially when that's 35 coming off of 2 severe injuries.
Yeah, right. And I guess that can transition us into, potential role on the team if that ends up being a thing. But
if it does happen, where would he slot in? I guess right. Is the next conversation.
That's the question is what, right? Because we can talk about what role he would fill on the team. And then the follow-up question after we carve out a role for him is it worth it to have him, fill that role rather than someone who's on the roster already?
Right, absolutely. And we'll talk about that in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings, so stay tuned. Good tease, Scotty.
Thanks, man.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks makes curating easier to save more money on sports, comedy, concert, theater, and so much more. And there's this neat little toggle with Game Time as well that if you toggle it on, it shows all your fees up front. So there's nothing that's going to surprise you at checkout. With that all-in pricing, you just got to toggle that feature on and you'll have no surprise fees at checkout. It's fantastic to know they're not trying to pull one over on you. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. So, Scotty, we've both kind of laid it out for the people, right? We feel that Max Pacioretty would be kind of, while there are positives, right, if he does bounce back, this is a player that does have offense in him, if he can bounce back, but we have doubts about him bouncing back, especially due to his age and, you know, just overall roster construction of this team. We're not sure that we need another player of his type as of right now, when this team needs to get better defensively first and foremost. So my question, the next question is, and you teased it, is if they do sign him, because they reportedly are one of the finalists, what would be his role on this team?
Yeah, I mean, is this not just like a slam dunk bottom six winger? I don't know. I have a hard time believing that he would work his way into the top half of the lineup card, but I think that if they really are desperate for some veteran leadership and again some offensive production down in the bottom six, that maybe that would be a viable option. Has played a lot of left wing in his time. I'm sure that would be where they would stick him if he was on the team. But I don't know, like maybe a like second unit power play. Like, I don't know. I have a really hard time seeing a clear and obvious fit here. But again, if they're really taking a look at the goals that walked out the door and going, hey, we would like someone with that has scored a lot before, has produced a lot of points before, and maybe could get some upside, then again, like I'm not against it. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm just like, this can't happen, this is ridiculous. Like if it happens, I'll put my faith in the front office. It's just not a clear cut path to production, and very far from a guarantee of production as well.
Right. I mean, this is a guy that if they were to sign him, I'd want it to be a 1-year deal. Absolutely. He got paid $2 million last year. I would hope that it would be something along those lines again this year. Just given the fact that, you know, his rate of production did fall off comparatively to his previous years. Like the 5 games he played with Carolina, he scored 3 goals. He was 3 points in 5 games. With Washington, it became 23 and 47 in terms of points. Nowhere near what it was with Vegas the 2 years prior, where he was over a point per game his second year with Vegas, and then just under a point per game the third year. So, like, this is a guy who, coming off of 2 consecutive traumatic injuries, his point production has fallen off, and that could be a combination of age as well. I would want it to be like a $2 million contract, if that. I think he's proved that he can still play in the NHL. I just don't think he's going to be as effective anymore. And again, I could be completely wrong. I have been wrong in the past. But that means that if you're signing him, the role in which he would then play, to me, is power play 2 specialist, bottom 6 forward, scoring role. Like, to me, this is like a Jonathan Berggren blocker. And now they're not the 1-for-1 because they're not the same players. No 2 players are the 1-for-1 comps. But if you're looking for a depth forward who's going to primarily, I know he only had 4 goals and 19 assists last year, but at least throughout his career has a bit of a penchant for scoring goals at a decent clip, and only plays power play and not penalty kill. Like, whose role in the bottom 6 is he taking?
I'll tell you
this.
If that is the plan, they should trade Berger immediately. Like, seriously, that there is. And again, I'm not saying that that's like that's the worst thing in the world. But if they bring Patches in to block Berger, that is, I say it all the time, right? My favorite quote is like, front offices will tell you how they feel about a player if you just listen. That will be the nail in the coffin to me on this organization's faith in Jonathan Berger. Like if they bring in a 35, 36-year-old coming off of 2 Achilles tears to play in the bottom 6 over Berger, then they don't think he's a good hockey player. Like, and that's as simple as it is. And that's, again, if they're correct, that's fine. But like, you should move on. Like, seriously, right. There is that would be the absolute, just like they could put a neon sign outside of LCA that says, "We do not trust Jonathan Berger," and it wouldn't be as obvious as that move would be to imply that.
Well, and so then the other option here is, because like, while that works out more from a gameplay perspective as to who he would slot in for, the reasons why that wouldn't work is because, Bergen's a right wing, Pacioretty is mainly a left wing. And the other option is maybe they just want to beef up depth scoring in general, so you'd run both. But then who are you cutting? At that point, you're sacrificing defense, because your other wingers are Rasmussen, who's a much better two-way winger. Doesn't have nearly the scoring touch that Pacioretty did in his prime.
Yeah.
Tyler Mott, Christian Fischer, right? So like those players,
Fischer's not going anywhere. Why would you extend him just to cut him?
Right. And you're sacrificing defense at that point, which is something that you've been preaching that you need to get better. It doesn't make, I don't think that any of this makes sense. And then on top of that, you have to then, you're blocking one of your young guys like Carter Mazur, or again, Jonathan Berggren, or Marco Kasper, any of these guys who could come up and then at his age, like, not saying prime Pacioretty score 39 goals, but it could at least replicate 35-year-old Pacioretty's production and still be like a piece for the future.
Yeah, so the only route in which I see this making a little bit more sense to me is if they bring him in and then cut a defenseman. I think that is a path. Like, I don't think that, especially if they sat down and talked to him and were like, hey, 2 teams are interested in you, you're going to like get scratched. Like you're going to be, I'm not saying he's necessarily the 13th forward. Like maybe he plays more than somebody else, but like I if they're clear about role, maybe it's him. And if that's ridiculous to you listening that, and you're like, no, obviously he's going to go somewhere and play, then fine. But like, I still think that would be the route to bringing him on, would be like, okay, we've figured out what to do with Justin Hall, or like, we're going to part ways with like Oli Mata. Like if there's something on the blue line that can get shaken up, then I think then maybe they would have a little bit more flexibility and feel a little bit easier about bringing another forward on. Because, like, I mean, to your point and what we've been talking about this whole time, if they keep it at 12, I'm not really sure there's any point in doing it.
Right. And so you bring up a good point there, right? So we have been speculating. We've had conversations, and I've had conversations with friends away from here as well. Like, if they're not going to make another trade, then the next most obvious thing they're going to do is they're going to cut somebody or waive somebody after training camp or after preseason to make room for a 13th forward. And, we talked a little bit yesterday, think about the possibility of, waiving Justin Hull, sending him to Grand Rapids. You get $1.15 million in relief when you send, a guy his tenure down to the AHL. And if somebody takes him off waivers, okay, even better, right?
Not happening. But yeah.
Not happening. But, for example, that's something that could be done in order to free up a roster spot, or one of your goaltenders, right? You're carrying 3 right now, possibly 4. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You got to waive at least one of these goalies. You make room. Now you can carry a 13th forward. But then, again, there is your problem. You have 13 projected forwards on your roster. That, again, blocks youth. You then, for certain, can't have Carter Mazur. You then, for certain, can't have Marco Kasper. Not that they would be 13th forwards, but it takes up that roster spot for an extra forward to be carried. And that again, feels like it's counterintuitive. Now, this could all be explained away if you just simply tell me that those guys aren't ready, or the front office simply tells me those guys aren't ready, and that's why we made this move. All right, fine. But we know what we saw out of Carter Mazur. We know what we saw out of Marco Kasper, and we know what we saw out of Jonathan Berggren. We think, at least 2 of those 3 guys are NHL ready this season. So why would you sign a vet to block him from coming up to the NHL level? That wouldn't make any sense. And I'm not trying to get into we can make arguments for the positives of Max Pacioretty because I think he would provide decent depth scoring and be another power play option and leadership, right? Like those are distinct positives of him, but I just don't see those positives right now outweighing the positives having a cheap young player up here learning how to play in the NHL when you're trying to take that step into a playoff team.
Yeah, that part doesn't bother me as much, to be honest. Like I don't know, and we've always kind of seen like differently on the like blocking conversation is usually where we don't see eye to eye anyway. Like in my mind, he's 36 coming off of 2 major injuries. Like, okay, like if he comes aboard and is the 13th forward and they do make room for him, you are 1 injury away from any forward from getting one of those, getting Carter Mazur called up anyway. Like, I don't think that's, when was the last time 13 forwards stayed 100% healthy for a full season? Never. Like I like Carter Mazur would get an opportunity at some point. I think I don't view depth as a bad thing. And as we've talked about a lot this summer as well, like Mazur is not a guy I don't think they are going to require a lot of minutes for at the NHL level to pull the trigger on and call him up, right? Like if it's Marco Kasper or a Danielson even, right? Like that is a player that, yes, like they're going to have to carve out big minutes for. Well, Patches isn't going to block anybody who they're going to wait to give big minutes to. Like the only person he'd really be quote unquote blocking as opposed to right now is Mazur, and you would just call him up when an injury happened, which inevitably will happen probably pretty early in the year. So like that part of it doesn't bother me as much, but I mean, everything else we see eye to eye on, like this is a move that you would have to make another move to be able to justify bringing him in for sure.
Fair. That's fair. We're going to take another quick break. When we return, we're actually going to change topics into the Wings center ice art revealed and how we were completely wrong. But hey, that happens all the time. Nothing major. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings, coming up. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Real quick before we get to the center ice thing, again, like whatever you guys think about the Max Pacioretty thing, I want to hear your comments because, again, if they sign Max Pacioretty tomorrow, I could spin it, Like I see the positives to having somebody like that in the locker room. I just don't see it outweighing the potential like question marks, right? Or the potential negatives to signing him either. But I was very wrong on Patrick Kane, and we both own that every single day. So let us know in the comments, are you pro Max Pacioretty? Do you think that would be short-sighted to sign him? Let us know. It's
also probably going to be pretty cheap. So like if it doesn't work out, it's going to be a 1-year deal and it's going to be cheap. Like I don't, how much risk is really involved in bringing him in, I guess is my point. If the price gets too high and, the Wings sign him for $5 million, then like, yeah, we'll be mad. But like, you know what I mean? Like if it's around the money we're assuming he's going to get, it's going to be a low risk thing anyway. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. This is something that hasn't even happened yet, but
yep. Now, as far as the center ice goes, we speculated last week because a slew of center ice logos were revealed across the NHL, and it seemed as if there was a new NHL mandate to completely fill that center ice circle, and we were wrong because the Red Wings revealed theirs today, and it is just the normal Red Wings logo at center ice. Scotty, I mean, your thoughts on that? Are you disappointed that it's the regular center ice logo, or you're like, hey, still looks sharp?
No, I don't know. Like I'm definitely not disappointed is definitely not the word. I think the Wings are just so, like everything about the Detroit Red Wings is just so awesome. And like my roommate says all the time that, when it comes to jerseys and logos and, on ice stuff, like the Wings brand has one issue, and it's that they got it perfect the first try. right? So they're like, is like no one's ever happy with like the alternate stuff that they do because it's like they crushed it their first attempt 100 years ago, 99 years ago. Next year's so you know what I mean. So like I have no issue with them just going with the tried and true and just going with what we're used to out there. It looks beautiful. It's the winged wheel. I'm so pumped for hockey to be back. There's a part of me that would have, thought it would have been cool to see what it could have looked like if it was filled in, just because, like we obviously, tossed around a couple ideas. What was that last week? And earlier
like
this
that.
week, whenever it was, I don't know. Time's a construct.
Off-season blurs.
Yeah, right. But I think there were some cool like mock-ups out there too from like cool, Wings fans that are artistically oriented, which I am obviously not. It was cool to toss around ideas and workshop ideas, but like I don't know. I'm not like heartbroken that ours just looks how it does. Ours looks great.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, right? Like I'm a little bummed because I had gotten myself all excited about the idea of like having a new center ice design and like what it could look like. And so when I saw it, like part of me was like, "Oh, it's normal," but I was like, the normal center ice is just so clean. It looks so good in general that I couldn't really be too mad about it. I also love that they believe this is the second year in a row they've brought back the winged wheel on the red line itself, repeating instead of like the checker box.
Was last year the first year?
Was that or the year before was the first year they started doing that? Yeah. But the one thing I thought I noticed that may or may not be different is in the past, I feel like they physically painted the logo on there using a stencil. And I felt like watching the video this year that it was more of a graphic that they laid down and then kind of sprayed to seal on top. I don't know if I could be wrong, but I think that's different versus how they used to do it. Easier process by the looks of it, by a long shot. But I noticed that little tidbit, and I thought it was interesting to bring up that they've gone away from individually painting each wing, each feather, to putting a graphic down underneath. Which, I mean, to the viewer on the ice or on the seats, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. No. I mean, that's interesting. I don't know. I don't know I'm not nearly smart enough to tell you like the physics of ice either, and like like what the difference. I'm assuming there's like no difference in that. On the ice. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see if that carries over. Maybe it was just a stencil. I have no idea. Not an
Scotty cares so much.
So I don't know. Like it's gonna look great. It always does. I love the winged wheel. Go hockey. Like I you know what I mean? Like I'm not like heartbroken because it's not filled in. I did like seeing the fan base's mock-ups though. There were some really cool ones out there.
Yeah, there were. That's the biggest thing that we've been robbed of is all those fan mocks. Some really cool ones
honestly, right. And that's like anytime there's an alternate jersey concept thrown around, that's like half the fun is just seeing all the super really, really talented like artists come out of the woodwork and make mock-ups. That's honestly the coolest part of that, like rebranding and relogo kind of stuff. But like I said, Red Wings have the unfortunately got an 100% the first try. So the beautiful winged wheel.
Absolutely. Scotty, we're going to head to the end of the episode. We're going to take a quick break.
End here. Right. We're going to take a quick end of the episode here.
We're going to take a quick break for about 24 hours, and we'll be back to you tomorrow with a new episode. I'm feeling like we might be bringing back How Do You Feel About It Friday tomorrow. I'm feeling that in my bones.
That's headline news right there. If that's
headline
true.
News. I'm feeling it in my bones. It's got the vibe. Scotty, you have any final thoughts for the people?
I do not, man. We ball.
Cool. We ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.